Hello, all. Dr. Robert Silverman here. How are you doing today? Part 3 on COVID-19. Really want to talk about some things that have not been discussed enough on the social media platforms, on the TV. As a matter of fact, it hasn't been discussed at all on the TV. Want to talk about gut, your microbiome and your gut health's effect to the coronavirus. 80% of your immune cells are in your gut. And no one's really talking about that. We seem to have forgotten about that in reference to protecting ourselves. So our biggest problem is that inflammation is high, so we are more susceptible to the coronavirus. We have something that we call a cytokine storm. That storm is very interesting in that it's based on the ability to create massive amount of inflammation. Most of our inflammation will come from our gut. Some new studies that actually came out, the CDC showed yesterday that 40% of the patients were sick enough to be hospitalized. That was in the age bracket of 20 to 59. Now, interestingly enough, that's my age bracket. We were told that that wasn't supposed to happen to our age bracket. But what they're finding out is a lot of these people had specific conditions that could be attributed to poor gut health. You know, in America, we traditionally have very, very poor gut health. 80% of our immune cells are in our gut. It's where our macro and micronutrients are absorbed. Once we have what we call a leaky gut or not pristine gut health, we leave ourselves susceptible to increased localized inflammation, systemic inflammation, and believe it or not, cytokine storm. Well, that cytokine storm, which I've referred to multiple times, actually can come from 3 different barriers. They come from the lung barrier, it can come from the kidney barrier, and it can come from the gut barrier. Now, interestingly enough, with that gut barrier, when that barrier is open, it stimulates what we call the NLRP3 inflammasome. That's very common. If we have something in our gut they call LPS, lipopolysaccharide, that is an endotoxin. If we release this endotoxin, it attaches to the cell membrane, we talked about that yesterday, and stimulates this NLRP3, which is the release of cytokines. 2 most common cytokines that we talk about is interleukin beta 1 and interleukin 18. Essentially, if our gut is not in good condition, look what can happen. So, the CDC 2 days ago said ibuprofen should not be used for managing symptoms. Now, one thing about ibuprofen we know is it's a non-steroid anti-inflammatory. NSAIDs, if you will, decrease pain, but they impair healing. One of the biggest reasons that they impair healing is they damage the gut lining, they damage the gut microbiota, and they can also damage what we call tight junctions. So taking ibuprofen, one should really almost never take ibuprofen, but taking ibuprofen at this time for some muscle aches is going to be extraordinarily deleterious to everybody's overall health. So the CDC is talking about these things. So for me, what do I do for good gut health? Number one, good quality foods, good organic foods, foods that are whole foods, fruits, vegetables, good grass-fed meats, wild fish. Use the acronym SMASH, salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. Those are great choices. Again, the grass-fed, you know, everybody knows that we're still, even though New York's on a bit of a lockdown now, we're allowed to shop, we're allowed to go to the store. Let's stock up on some good fruits and vegetables. Things to avoid. The things that I would avoid are grains, gluten. We talked about it yesterday. Gluten means glue. No dairy, no grains. These are things that are very damaging to our gut lining. In addition, high sugar. Sugar is shown to be extremely ruinous to overall health and our gut lining. So let's avoid that. We're home. Some things that we can do at home that are excellent to help our gut lining, believe it or not, exercise. Exercise has a very positive health benefit on most people. What are the conditions that most people will see when they have damage to their gut lining? Well, the initial thing, if there's some damage to the gut lining, you'll see is a lot of gas and bloating. I always ask everybody, do you get gas and bloating after you eat? Well, if you do, you probably have a digestion problem. Do you get brain fog after you eat? If you do, you may have an issue from the gut to the brain. Some other conditions, some of the chronic diseases, diabetes, or is this sounding familiar? Respiratory problems, all the things that they're talking about that make you very susceptible to the coronavirus and susceptible to a really bad outcome in the coronavirus. So everybody should consider the gut, take better care of their gut. In addition to that, there's something called the gut to lung pathway. So that was something that I usually don't talk about. Everybody who knows that I always talk about the gut and the gut to brain. Well, I looked up some studies in the last year alone, and it was shown that probiotics are great for preventing acute respiratory tract infections. It was just said in a major periodical, the gut to lung axis in health and respiratory disease is a critical element. They call it the interkingdom. In addition to that, there is an early study that talked about the 2019 novel coronavirus infection and its direct correlation to GI tract health and permeability. We know that bacteria in your gut can pose a lot of good things like decrease in infections, decrease in inflammation, decrease in respiratory. So one of the things that we're going to talk about or expand upon a little bit more, I know there's some questions coming up that we want to talk about things that help populate your gut. So once again, probiotics, fermented foods like garlic, onions, kimchi. Interesting thing about kimchi that I just read, kimchi also has a compound called quercetin in it. It's a very high compound found in kimchi. That quercetin is great because it decreases the cytokine storm. In addition to that, some other foods that we recommend would be, once again, the fruits and vegetables. And some things that people don't really realize are really healthy, dark chocolate. Dark chocolate is excellent because dark chocolate is a great choice for overall health. I know everybody's cheering out there now, something to eat, and it's a great snack to have. Yesterday I got an email on a question on the gut, and they said, Dr. Rob, your gut to brain axis, you have a book coming out, The Superhighway to Health and all that. How come you haven't talked about it? Well, I'm talking about it today. And with that being said, one other time I want to circle back to the gut to lung is very simply, whatever bacteria you have in your gut, you have the same bacteria in the lining of your lung. Whatever parasites you have in your gut, you have the same lining in your lungs. And in addition, whatever viruses you have in your gut, you're going to have in your lungs. And one of the biggest problems with the coronavirus is its attack to lungs. So with that being said, if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask questions. Flatten the curve. A couple other things that I wanted to go over that were in the news on the coronavirus is something called RO or R naught. Basically, it's the reproduction number. It's what is expressed as one person who's infected can share and how many people they can share this disease with other people. So the RO of SARS, everybody remembers SARS, was 2.7. The RO of measles is anywhere from 12 to 18. The RO, the ability to spread for coronavirus at this point is 2.2. So we always talk about coronavirus versus SARS because it's an outbreaking of a new SARS virus. Interesting, the SARS, even though it was 2.7, was able to decrease in 6 weeks to 1 or below 1, and that's why they were able to encase it so quickly. Whereas the coronavirus, for multiple reasons, we haven't been able to get down that contagious effect or that RO. Seasonal flu is much less than that. Some other things that they talked about here from yesterday very simply was the coronavirus also has a natural origin. So there are conspiracy theorists that have talked about that it was man-made, etc. This study came out in Nature Medicine in March 17, 2020. They did an analysis of the public genome sequence data for SARS-CoV-2 and related viruses and found no evidence that the virus was made in a laboratory or otherwise engineered. They can't replicate that spike or that spike protein that we talked about yesterday. It's actually a mutation in the human, and as we talked about over the last few days, it's from animal to animal, animal to human, human to human, and been mutated twice. One more over here that we wanted to talk about, interestingly enough, was the ability for and what went through a person who had it and how they got over it. So they studied a woman in Australia who came back from China. On day 4, she went into the hospital. They immediately didn't actually treat her. They wanted to see what would happen. They gave her natural supplements. So day 9, they found out that all her immunoglobulins, her natural bodies, her natural antibodies came out. And between day 9 and 11, they had a huge surge of these natural antibodies. She was able to stay alone at herself on day 11. And by day 13, there was a resolve. So there's a quick resolution as long as our immune system is strong. So on Monday, we're going to go over everything you can possibly think of to keep your immune system strong. Today, we've got to start talking about our gut. So if you want to help your gut change, no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, probiotics, L-glutamine, get some good quality sleep, and get some exercise. Do we have anybody? All right, so
Trish Given says hi.
Hey Trish, how are you? Great shout out. Hopefully you're finding this very informative for you. We're just doing a lot of podcasts. We're doing a lot of Facebook Lives. So please feel free if, I know everybody's a little busy. We just got shocked here in New York about the proverbial essential worker deal. So if you want to get in touch, do me a favor, put it in the comments. I'm here for you every weekday at 1 o'clock. I'll be talking about coronavirus and the new information of the day, including, you guys can always go to my LinkedIn. I got a whole bunch of stuff over there. We good? Terrific. Dr. Rob, always yours in health.